The thing about being the only human at Galactic University is that everyone treats you like you're made of cotton candy and dreams. Seriously, on my first day, the admissions officer tried to assign me a personal gravity reducer because they assumed Earth Standard 1G would crush my delicate bones. I had to explain that no, actually, I quite enjoyed having my internal organs properly arranged. Thank you very much. Name's Alex Rhodes, and I'm what the galactic community calls a Deathworlder, though you wouldn't know it from how they treat me. Sure, Earth's got its challenges. Gravity that would squish half my classmates, atmospheric pressure that would make others pop like balloons at a dart convention, and enough bacteria to give our medical staff recurring nightmares. But somehow, I'm the fragile one. Take Professor Nix Vell, my Xenobiology 401 instructor. They're basically a sentient lava lamp with 3 PhDs and an attitude problem. Every time I walk into their classroom, their gelatinous form ripples with what I can only describe as anxious concern, like they're expecting me to spontaneously combust from the effort of existing. "Ah, Student Rhodes," they burbled during today's class, their voice coming from somewhere within their translucent mass. "Do be careful with the new holodisplays. They're calibrated for standard Class 3 planetary environments." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. "Professor, we've been over this. I'm not going to break from touching school equipment." A concerned ripple passed through their form. Yes, but your species' unique calcium-based support structure, you mean bones, is rather primitive and susceptible to trauma." From across the room, Vrax let out a sound like sandpaper scraping against metal, their version of a smug chuckle. Picture a walking silicon crystal with an ego the size of a small moon, and you've got Vrax. Perhaps Student Rhodes should observe from behind a protective barrier? I've read that humans require constant environmental controls to survive. "That's a spacesuit, you geometric gossip," I muttered, sliding into my seat. "And I only need one when I'm in, space." Zephyr, a crystalline being who somehow managed to be less dense than Vrax, despite literally being made of living crystal, chimed in with their bell-like voice. "Is it true humans have to shut down for 8 hours every day just to prevent system failure?" "It's called sleep, and bold of you to judge when you spend 3 days a week in photosynthesis mode." The only one who didn't regularly treat me like I was about to shatter was Meepo, a fuzzy empath who looked like someone had given sentience to a dryer's lint trap. They bounced excitedly in their hover seat next to me, their fur rippling with genuine curiosity rather than condescension. Alex, I watched more of those Earth nature documentaries you recommended. The ones about your world's microfauna. Those tardigrades are absolutely fascinating. Though I'm a bit concerned about how close the camera crew got to such dangerous megafauna. I didn't have the heart to tell them that tardigrades were microscopic. Let them keep thinking Earth's most resilient creature was the size of a public transport pod. It was kind of adorable. Professor Nix Vell's form coalesced at the front of the classroom, their educational credentials floating in suspended animation within their transparent body. Show off. "Class, today we begin our unit on evolutionary adaptation and natural predators. Each student will present on their homeworld's most formidable hunter, examining the environmental pressures that shaped their development." A ripple of excitement passed through the class. Well, literally through some of them. We've got a lot of semi-corporeal beings here at GU. "Student Rhodes," the professor continued, their tone dripping with what they probably thought was kindness, but came across as patronizing. "Given Earth's relatively sheltered environment, you may choose to present on one of your world's less threatening creatures. Perhaps one of those endothermic comfort companions your species keeps." "You mean a cat?" "If you're comfortable discussing such an apex predator." I slouched in my seat, a smile tugging at my lips. Oh, this was going to be fun. Because while my classmates were busy assuming Earth was some sort of cosmic petting zoo, they'd completely overlooked one tiny detail. Our planet is mostly ocean, and what lives in those oceans would give their entire species collective trauma. Time to introduce them to the concept of sharks. But first, I had to sit through everyone else's presentations, which meant another few hours of being treated like I might faint at the mere mention of natural selection. Just another day at Galactic U, where being human meant being the galaxy's most coddled apex predator. You ever watch a train wreck in slow motion? That's basically what the next week of class was like, except instead of a train, it was my classmates' egos about to collide headfirst with reality. One by one, they stepped up to present their homeworld's most dangerous predators, each more dramatic than the last. Vrax went first because of course they did. Their crystalline forms sparkled under the classroom lights as they projected a hologram of what looked like a sentient mountain with teeth made of diamond. "Behold, the Silicax render," they announced, their voice grating with pride. "It can consume entire geological formations in seconds." "Fascinating," Professor Nixvell rippled appreciatively. "And how many sentient beings has it consumed?" "None," Vrax admitted, their edges dulling slightly. "They're strictly geological consumers, but they're very intimidating to watch." Next up was Zephyr, who chimed nervously through their presentation about some sort of atmospheric predator that literally ate lightning. Cool concept, absolutely useless against anything that wasn't flying through an electrical storm. They even included a dramatic recreation of one hunting, which mostly looked like a very angry cloud having an argument with the sky. Meepo's presentation actually had promise. They bounced excitedly as they showed off their world's terror floof. Imagine a cross between a wolverine and a tsunami, covered in the same kind of fur as Meepo. "It can consume prey 3 times its size," they chirped proudly. "How big is it?" I asked, genuinely curious. "About the size of your hand." I thought about the bears back home and tried not to laugh. The whole time, Professor Nixvell kept shooting these concerned glances my way, their gelatinous form wobbling with worry every time someone mentioned hunting techniques or digestive processes, like I was going to faint at the mere mention of one creature eating another. Perhaps, they suggested during a particularly detailed description of acid-based prey digestion, Student Rhodes would prefer to step out. "I'm fine, Professor. We have acid-producing organisms on Earth, too. We call them teenagers." That got me a room full of blank stares and one appreciative giggle from Meepo, who'd recently discovered Earth humor and was still trying to figure it out. The presentations went on. One student showed off a plant that could think. Another had some kind of quantum predator that existed in multiple dimensions at once, but conveniently couldn't be properly captured on video. Vrax kept interjecting with helpful comments about how these creatures would be too much for my primitive nervous system to comprehend. Finally, after 3 days of this, Professor Nixvell turned their attention to me. Their educational credentials swirled anxiously inside their transparent form as they spoke. "Student Rhodes, while we would normally expect a presentation on your world's apex predator, given Earth's protected status in the galactic community, perhaps you could instead tell us about one of your world's less threatening species. I believe you mentioned something called a cat earlier." The entire class rippled, chimed, or buzzed with what they probably thought was supportive encouragement. Even Meepo's fur flattened in concern. "Yes. Tell us about the cats. I've seen pictures. They look so soft and harmless." I smiled. Not my usual dealing with alien misconceptions smile, but the kind of smile that made our ancient ancestors the apex predators of Earth. The kind of smile that says, "I know something you don't, and you're not going to like it." "Actually, Professor," I said, pulling out my datapad, "I'd like to tell the class about an Earth species called Carcharodon carchareus, but you might know it better by its common name." I pulled up the first image in my presentation, the great white shark. The room went silent. Well, except for Vrax, who made a sound like a chalkboard having a stroke. "I must insist," Professor Nixvell began, their form rippling with alarm, "that you consider the sensitivities of—" "Did you know," I continued cheerfully, "that they're actually not even our most dangerous predator? They're just my personal favorite. Now let me tell you about their teeth. They have several rows of them, and when one falls out, Another just rotates forward to replace it, like a conveyor belt of evolutionary perfection. Meepo's fur stood straight up. Zephyr's crystalline form began to chime in distress. And Vrax? Vrax was starting to look a lot less smug and a lot more like they were considering a career change to something less traumatic, like asteroid mining. This was going to be fun. The university library at night is something else. Imagine a cathedral built by architects who'd only had space described to them in interpretive dance. The entire place is alive with holographic indexes floating between shelves that rearrange themselves based on your research patterns. Usually, it's pretty quiet, just the occasional hum of a quantum database compiling or the soft chimes of crystalline students in study mode. Tonight, though, it was just me, surrounded by floating displays showing Earth's oceans in all their terrifying glory. And Meepo, because of course Meepo had followed me here. "I don't understand," they chirped, their fur rippling with confusion as they watched a slow-motion video of a great white breaching. "How does it move through the dihydrogen monoxide solution so efficiently without propulsion technology?" "It's called swimming," I explained, pulling up another hologram. "And it's water, Meepo. You can just call it water." "But it's a liquid at room temperature, a naturally occurring liquid that covers most of your planet. And you say things live in it?" "About 80% of Earth species, yeah." Meepo's fur went completely flat. "Your species evolved on a death world covered in liquid death, populated by creatures that have evolved to thrive in liquid death. And somehow we're the ones treating you like you're fragile." Finally, someone gets it. I grinned, queuing up my favorite part of the presentation. "Want to see something really cool? This is how they hunt seals." The hologram showed a great white approaching from below, accelerating upward with the kind of predatory grace that makes other apex predators reconsider their career choices. Meepo made a sound like a squeaky toy having an existential crisis. That's beautiful," they whispered, their fur now cycling through what I recognized as their species' equivalent of awe and terror. "Terrifying, but beautiful. Do the others know about this?" "Not yet, but they will tomorrow." I adjusted the presentation sequence, making sure to include the tooth replacement footage that had made Meepo briefly lose control of their fur pigmentation. "Hey, want to help me with something? I need someone to film the class reaction." Meepo's fur rippled with excitement. "The one where it launches itself completely out of the water again? Please tell me you're showing that one." "Oh, I'm showing all of them, including the pack hunting footage." "They hunt in groups?" Meepo's voice went up an octave. Like synchronized liquid death?" "Sometimes, but wait until you see what happens during a feeding frenzy." We spent the next few hours going through my presentation. Meepo asked approximately 8 million questions, each more horrified and fascinated than the last. They were particularly stuck on the concept of sharks being older than trees, which led to a whole tangent about Earth's evolutionary history that ended with them staring at their own fur as if questioning every life choice that had led to this moment. "Alex," they said finally, as I was putting the finishing touches on my presentation, "you know this is going to completely destroy their understanding of universe, right?" "That's kind of the point. Vrax might actually shatter. Literally. Their species does that under extreme stress." "I know. I already filled out the cleanup request form." Meepo's fur rippled with what I'd learned to recognize as their version of laughter. "You really prepared for everything, didn't you?" "Well, when you're from a death world, you learn to be thorough." I pulled up one final hologram, this one showing a size comparison between a great white and the average alien species represented in our class. Besides, they wanted to learn about Earth's predators. It would be rude not to give them the full educational experience. Professor Nix Vell is going to have a phase transition, also covered in the cleanup request form. As we left the library, Meepo bouncing alongside me with their fur still cycling through various shades of amazement and horror, I couldn't help but feel a bit proud. Tomorrow, my classmates would finally understand why humans weren't just surviving on a death world. We were thriving there. And if a few crystalline beings had to be swept up afterward, well, that's just part of the learning process. Have you ever had one of those moments where you know you're about to change everyone's worldview forever? That's how I felt walking into class the next day. Meepo had positioned themselves strategically in the back row, recording device ready, their fur practically vibrating with anticipation. Professor Nixvell's form rippled uncertainly as I approached the presentation area. Student Rhodes, one final time, I must suggest that perhaps a less intensive subject matter. Professor, I interrupted politely, you asked us to present our world's predators. I'm simply following the assignment parameters. I paused for effect. Unless you're suggesting that humans are too fragile to handle our own planetary biology? Their educational credentials swirled in agitation. Checkmate. Very well, they burbled reluctantly. Please proceed. I pulled up my first hologram, a simple size comparison chart. Let's start with some basic facts. The great white shark can grow up to 6 meters in length, roughly the size of Professor Nixvell's classroom podium. Vrax made a dismissive sound. Size is hardly an indicator of predatory prowess. My silicon renders can move at speeds up to 56 kilometers per hour, I continued smoothly, in a liquid environment. The room went quiet. Even Zephyr stopped their usual background chiming. But what makes them truly remarkable isn't their size or speed. It's their evolutionary perfection. I switched to the next hologram, a detailed anatomical scan. You see, sharks have existed on Earth for over 450 million years. That's longer than trees have existed. They survived multiple mass extinction events that wiped out nearly all life on our planet. Why? Because they're perfect at what they do. Professor Nixvell's form had started to lose cohesion around the edges. Student Rhodes, perhaps we should... Let's talk about their teeth. I zoomed in on the jaw structure. They have multiple rows of serrated teeth, each designed to rip, tear, and saw through prey. When they lose a tooth, which happens frequently, a new one rotates forward to replace it. Some sharks can go through up to 50,000 teeth in their lifetime. Vrax's crystalline surface had developed several stress fractures. But the really interesting part is their hunting technique. I queued up the breach footage. You see, great whites are ambush predators. They patrol beneath their prey, almost invisible in the water, and then the hologram showed a great white launching itself completely out of the water, a seal in its jaws. Several students made sounds I didn't even know their species could produce. Meepo's recording device was working overtime. That's 3 meters of pure muscle launching itself entirely out of the water, I noted cheerfully. And they can do this multiple times in a single hunt. But surely they're solitary creatures? Someone squeaked from the back. Oh, I'm so glad you asked. I switched to the feeding frenzy footage. While they often hunt alone, they also participate in group feeding events. Here's what happens when multiple great whites find the same food source. The hologram filled the room with images of churning water, multiple massive sharks in a feeding frenzy. Someone crystallized in terror. I'm pretty sure it was Vrax. The truly fascinating part, I continued, as if I hadn't just caused several of my classmates to enter voluntary shutdown modes, is their sensory capabilities. They can detect a single drop of blood in multiple Olympic-sized swimming pools of water. They can sense the electrical impulses from a beating heart. Some species of shark need to keep swimming even while sleeping, or they'll die. They've evolved to be such perfect predators that they literally can't stop. Professor Nixvell had completely lost their humanoid shape and was now just a vaguely academic puddle on the floor. Student Rhodes, they managed to burble. I believe we've seen enough. Oh, but I haven't even gotten to the best part yet. I pulled up the final hologram, a complete Earth-ocean ecosystem diagram. You see, great whites aren't even our most dangerous marine predator. They're just my favorite. Would you like to hear about orcas? They're intelligent enough to create hunting strategies on the fly and teach them to others. Or maybe the colossal squid. We're not even sure how big they can get because they live so deep in our oceans that we rarely see adult specimens. Meepo's fur was cycling through colors I'd never seen before, their recording device capturing every moment of the class's collective breakdown. And remember, I added, unable to resist the finale, our oceans cover over 70% of Earth's surface. Everything I've shown you, that's just what we know about. We've only explored about 5% of Earth's oceans. Imagine what else is down there. That did it. Vrax shattered into exactly 47 pieces. I counted during cleanup later. 3 gaseous students had to be collected with special vacuum devices. Professor Nix Vell was still trying to pull themselves back into a coherent shape. And Meepo was practically glowing with vicarious pride. "Are there any questions?" I asked the shell-shocked room. A single trembling appendage raised from the back. Are you saying you humans evolved on a planet with these creatures?" I smiled my best apex predator smile. Evolved with them? No. We hunted them, for sport. Sometimes we'd go swimming with them in special reinforced cages, for fun. The room descended into chaos, and as I watched my classmates try to process the reality of Earth's marine life, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they'd stop treating me like I was made of spun sugar. Though honestly, watching Vrax get swept into a dustpan was almost worth the whole semester of condescension. News travels fast in a university full of telepaths, empaths, and beings who communicate through quantum entanglement. By the end of the day, the story of the human who broke Xenobiology 401 had spread across campus faster than a shark through chum-filled waters. The cleanup crew was still trying to collect all the pieces of Vrax when Dean Axvu, a being made entirely of living mathematics, manifested in our classroom. They took one look at Professor Nix Vell, still struggling to maintain a consistent shape, and the various students in various states of existential crisis then turned their probability-defying attention to me. "Student Rhodes," they said, their voice somehow simultaneously a whisper and an equation. "I understand you gave quite the illuminating presentation today." "Just following the assignment parameters, Dean Axvu." "Indeed." They flickered thoughtfully. "And would you say this is a typical example of Earth's biodiversity?" "Oh no," I replied cheerfully. "Sharks are pretty tame compared to some things. Did you know we have a spider that can kill you in 4 hours? Or birds that deliberately start forest fires to flush out prey? Or these cute little frogs that are so poisonous that touching one could kill several adult humans?" The dean's mathematical form glitched. Behind them, someone who had just started to reconstitute themselves promptly dissolved again. "I see," they said carefully. "And humans just live with these creatures?" "Well, not the sharks, obviously. Those live in the ocean. We just go there for vacation sometimes." A small quantum singularity formed briefly in the corner of the room, which I'm pretty sure was just someone's brain trying to emergency exit from reality. Meepo, still recording everything with the dedication of a documentary filmmaker who'd stumbled onto the story of the century, bounced over. Their fur had settled into a pattern that somehow managed to convey both absolute terror and complete admiration. "Dean Axvu, Alex was just telling me about something called a cassowary. It's like their version of our terrorfloof, except it's taller than a human and can disembowel you with a single kick. And humans consider them one of their less dangerous animals. Isn't that fascinating?" The dean's form flickered in what might have been concern, or existential dread, hard to tell with living mathematics. "Perhaps," they suggested, "we should consider revising our classification of Earth in the galactic database." "Oh, right," I added, as if just remembering. "We should probably update the entry about Earth's oceans, too. You know those giant squid I mentioned? We thought they were myths until fairly recently. Makes you wonder what else is down there, doesn't it?" Professor Nix Vell, who had finally managed to achieve something approaching their usual shape, promptly lost cohesion again. the dean turned to address what remained of the class. In light of today's revelations, I believe we should adjourn early. Maintenance will continue collecting student VRACs, and counseling services are available for anyone experiencing reality adjustment difficulties. What about tomorrow's class? Someone asked weakly from behind an emergency shield generator. I believe, the dean said, with the careful precision of someone reconsidering every interaction they'd ever had with a human. We should take some time to process this new information, and perhaps update our emergency protocols. As the room slowly emptied, some students floating, others rolling, a few having to be gently scooped into containment vessels, Meepo stayed behind, still filming. Alex, they chirped, their fur rippling with curiosity. You said sharks weren't even your most dangerous predator. What is... I grinned. Ever heard of a honey badger? The dean, who had been about to leave, suddenly developed several mathematical errors in their form. Perhaps, they suggested hastily, that's a discussion for another time. But Meepo was already pulling up the university's xenobiology database, their fur practically glowing with enthusiasm. Tell me everything. Behind us, Professor Nixvell finally gave up on maintaining physical form and just let themselves drain into a nearby collection basin. The cleanup crew, now expert in handling traumatized faculty, began the delicate process of decanting them into a portable containment unit. I looked at the chaos around us, the scattered crystalline fragments of VRACs waiting to be reassembled, the faint scorch marks from where several gaseous students had panic vented, the small temporal anomalies from where others had tried to nope their way into alternate dimensions, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Maybe now they'd stop trying to put warning labels on my coffee. It's amazing how quickly things can change. 1 minute you're the fragile Deathworlder everyone's afraid will break, and the next you're the Deathworlder everyone's afraid will introduce them to more Earth wildlife. The university had to create a whole new classification system just to deal with Earth's biosphere. They're calling it Designation Nope. VRACs eventually got reassembled, though they developed an interesting habit of taking alternate routes to class whenever they saw me coming. Their crystalline structure would start showing stress fractures every time someone mentioned large bodies of water. On the plus side, they finally stopped making comments about my primitive biology. Professor Nixvell recovered too, though they never quite managed to maintain their usual perfect geometric form during my presentations after that. They did, however, start offering a fascinating new course, Survival Strategies for Dealing with Terrestrial Biology. I'm told it's already oversubscribed for the next 3 semesters. The biggest change came from the dean's office. They updated Earth's classification in the Galactic database from Protected Habitat, Handle with Care, to Extreme Caution, Everything there is trying to kill you. They also added a special note. Native inhabitants may appear deceptively fragile. This is a lie. They swim with their predators for fun. Meepo became something of a celebrity after their recording went viral across the quantum net. They started a whole series, Earth, A Survivor's Guide to Deathworld Biology. Their episode on honey badgers caused 3 separate diplomatic incidents and had to be rated 18+ on the sentience scale. As for me, well, I got promoted to teaching assistant for the newly created Earth Studies department. Turns out there's a lot of interest in learning about a planet where the dominant species invented parkour just because regular running wasn't exciting enough. The university had to implement new safety protocols for my lectures. Apparently, showing footage of humans free-climbing cliffs or swimming with great whites is considered potentially traumatic content for most species. I had to sign a waiver promising to warn students before displaying any videos of extreme sports. But why? One student asked during a lecture on human recreational activities. Why would you deliberately put yourselves in danger for fun? I thought about trying to explain adrenaline junkies and extreme sports and humanity's endless quest to push boundaries. Instead, I just smiled and pulled up a video of wingsuit flying. 3 students had to be excused from class. The rest watched in horrified fascination. The truly interesting thing, I told the shell-shocked class, is that humans didn't develop most of these activities for survival. We do them purely for entertainment. In fact, we have to keep making them more extreme because we get bored easily. That's when someone in the back raised an appendage. Student Rhodes, are you saying that humans seek out dangerous situations for fun? Oh yes, we even invented something called social media just to share videos of ourselves doing increasingly dangerous things. The room erupted in a cacophony of terrified noises. Someone started a petition to reclassify humans as existential terror, approach with respect. It's currently gaining traction in the Galactic Senate. But the best part? Nobody tries to help me carry my books anymore. Though I do occasionally catch some of the braver students watching me with a mixture of terror and awe, especially after I mentioned that time I went skydiving, Meepo's still following me around with their recording device, working on their latest documentary. Humans, the species that looked evolution in the eye and said, "Hold my beer." It's already been preemptively classified as psychological horror in 3 star systems. And every now and then, when I'm feeling particularly nostalgic about that first shark presentation, I like to casually mention that Australia exists. Just to watch the quantum physics students try to calculate their way into a parallel universe where they never learned about Earth. You know what they say? Knowledge is power, terror is respect. And somewhere out there, a honey badger still doesn't care about any of it.